Yes, all right. Thank you for joining in today, everyone. Welcome to the Workplace Inclusion Index's webinar, Pride All Year Round. A very good evening. As Pride Month draws to a close with the end of June today, we will be focusing on the celebration of Pride and LGBTQIA inclusion at the workplace throughout the year. Thank you to everyone for taking time to join us today. I am Isha Temni, and my pronouns are she and her. We have with us today Sandhya Ramesh, she and her, Head of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion at Great Place to Work India Institute, in conversation with Sujata Menon Zafar, who is the VP of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion at at S&P Global, Indices and Strategic Business Alliances, Shravanti Lanka, Senior Director, Hyderabad Operations, S&P Global, and Tanuj Gupta, Regional People Lead, India, S&P Global. Over the course of the next 40 minutes, we will speak about intentional LGBTQIA inclusion at the workplace, benefits of people resource groups, optimizing inclusion in communication, and the importance of creating a sense of community. And we'll be ending with an audience question answer session and hopefully interesting rapid fire round. I'd like to take a moment to introduce our panelists for this evening, and I'll begin with Shravanti. Shravanti, as I said, is the Senior Director of Ops at S&P Global, and she is responsible for leading the Hyderabad, India side, which happens to be S&P Global's largest office globally. She has over 20 years of work experience and is a 19-year veteran of S&P. After working for nearly a decade in the NYC office of Platts, she moved to Hyderabad in 2011. She spent most of her time in technology developing products and leading high-performing teams before moving to ops. She is very passionate about employee resource groups and helping women build careers. She holds a master's degree in computer science from NYU and is currently pursuing her MBA from ISB Hyderabad. Tanuj is the regional people head India at S&P. He has 21 years of work experience and has previously worked with Comviva Technologies, Bharti Enterprises, Arison Technologies, and Honda Motorcycles. Tanuj believes that open and empowering conversations around talent and culture can create competitive advantage for the business. His journey as an HR professional has been about using HR strategies to enable business goals by building trusting relationships with all stakeholders. His personal vision is to evolve continuously while influencing positive change. Tanuj holds a degree in the Bachelor of Business Studies and an MBA. Sujata, our panelist from New York, thank you for making time and adjusting around the time zones, joined IHS Markit, which is now S&P Global, in June 2020 as the DEI lead for their financial services business. She is now the VP of DEI for S&P Global's Market Intelligence, Indices, and Strategic Alliance businesses. In addition to her divisional roles, she works closely with the firm's Chief Diversity, CR, and Foundation Officer to deliver key firm-wide DEI initiatives and commitments. She comes from a background in account management, sales, and BD, but most recently in diversity executive research and DEI consulting. In her previous role, Sujata has worked extensively with professional networks, vendors, and nonprofits to build strategic partnerships for diverse talent sourcing. In her consulting role, she worked with a network of over 100 firms to identify, share, and execute best practices across industries. Sujata completed her undergrad degree from Middlebury College and her DEI certification from Cornell. She serves on the board of Trans New York, an organization dedicated to bettering the lives of trans people in the tri-state area. She is also a proud member of Chief, a professional network focused on connecting and supporting women executive leaders. That was a very long introduction, and it's an honor to have you here as our guests. Participants, please do use the question and answer tab on your screen to ask questions. We'll be referring to that for the audience round later. And I will now hand over to Sandhya to begin with the discussion.
Thank you, Isha. Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another conversation around how we can advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in our workplace. Thank you so much for taking time out this evening. Thank you, Sujata. This evening in India, though, and I just realized for Sujata, the sun's just going to be up and about. Thank you, Sujata. Thank you, Shravanti and Tanuj, for joining us. S&P Global was, of course, one of India's best workplaces in diversity, equity, and inclusion 2021. And needless to say, we continue to learn from everything that the organization has been doing. also strategically, the reason why we're having a conversation on Pride at the end of the month is because we really believe Pride needs to be a conversation all year round, which is why when we were thinking of what would be the right, the right name for this particular session, it was simple. Our message just needed to be Pride all year round. So thank you. We're truly looking forward to this conversation. We also know it's been an exciting year, and I think what stood out for me while we were doing some of our initial conversations between Isha and myself was the fact that even just amongst all of you as panelists, you represent different organizations, erstwhile organizations, right? As most of you are aware, S&P just announced their completion of their integration with IHS Market. And I think what was so beautiful was, although, each of you did come from different parts of the organization, I think there was a common language and a common intention to want to advance social justice and equity, within S&P and to continue to keep us on that journey. So yes, while you are going through all of this as part of your integration as well, I'm just going to check in if Tanuj, you've been able to land okay in the meeting, and are you here with us? Maybe you can unmute and confirm. Yeah, I think Tanuj is still having a few, problems with his connectivity. I was just checking in to see how we can probably position this conversation, but I'm going to request maybe Shravanti to come in and talk about like the broader lens of when did this entire journey with respect to, a conscious effort when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion really begin at S&P Global? And Shravanti, how did the conversation of the LGBTIQA plus inclusion really begin at S&P Global? Hi, Shravanti, are you there?
Sandeep, give me 1 second. Sorry, I'm...
Sure. We were just discussing about how the tech gods have been a little unkind today. So I think we've got to offer all our prayers again.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, Shravanti, we can.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that.
Shravanti, so yes, I was in fact just trying to get a question across to Tanuj and yourself just on the larger journey of LGBTIQA inclusion at S&P Global. So maybe if you can throw a little bit of light on that, we can then move into some of the deeper aspects of, the hows and the what's of the journey.
I'm so sorry. I could not hear the question. So are you asking me my journey with the... Can you repeat that one more time? Sorry, Sandhya.
Sure, Shravanti. I was talking about the overall LGBTIQA plus journey at S&P Global overall.
Okay.
When did it begin, and maybe
Sure.
a larger...
Yes. So I will actually step back a little bit and start off saying at S&P, DI is at our core. So we've been focused on different communities for last few years now. So we started about 20. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Shravanti, go on. We can hear you okay.
Okay. So about 20 years ago, we started with S&P. At S&P, we started the PRG concept with Women's Network called WINS. It's basically to promote women leadership in the in the senior roles, and that's how the concept of diversity started at SNP. Over the years, we've started many PRGs, and currently in India we have about 5 of them, 5 PRGs. With I think the latest is the REACH, which is the PWD focused differently abled people. LGBTQ in India we started about in 2019, but overall I think at SNP as an organization it started in 2005. I'm just trying to make sure if you can hear me.
Yes, Shravanti, of course.
Okay.
Of course, we
All
can
right.
hear you.
Yeah.
And, I think picking up from there, because while, most organizations actually begin this entire journey around diversity, equity, and inclusion, starting with the larger demographics of gender. And that somehow seems to be one of the most logical ways, or at least the courage, that there seems to be enough courage to have that, right? A lot of it actually also is influenced by the social and the legal constructs in the larger ecosystem. And I know Sujata has been, of course, at the forefront of running a lot of aspects around, trans inclusion as well at the community level. And you've also had a broader understanding of the LGBTIQA inclusion across different countries. Sujata, would it be possible for you to come in and throw some light on the broader aspects of whether it's social or legal constructs that impact, how an organization can progress and how much an organization can progress when it comes to LGBTIQA plus inclusion in the workplace?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. And thank you, Sandhya and Isha, for having us here today. I'm just checking, Sandhya, you can hear me fine, right?
Yeah. Yes, I can. Thank you.
So that's a great question, Sandhya, because, often as a global company, we have to take into account, let's talk about the legal aspect first, because I think in many ways that tends to be much more complicated, right? In terms of where you can start things, how you can talk about LGBTQIA plus inclusion. And you do need to be incredibly careful because it actually can affect the safety of our employees and our colleagues across the world. So having said that, so the legal aspect is a super important part. And there are, we operate in countries, Pakistan, Malaysia, Singapore, that homosexuality is still criminalized. So you have to be incredibly careful when you are implementing any LGBT plus, policies or any of that, or any sort of inclusion efforts. However, the beauty of a large global company is that colleagues in these countries who do identify as LGBTQ plus, the good part of that is they do have a global support system that they can tap into, a global pride network they can tap into. The complication comes with ID, your self-ID. In our companies, we encourage people to self-ID so that we can look at certain demographics and make sure that our policies are the way we sort of move forward with inclusion. It is through, we need to know how many people in our firm identify as that demographic. In many countries, because it's still illegal, you can't self-ID. And also, like I said, the communications part needs to be very, very carefully crafted so that we're not breaking any local laws. So as I said, the legal part is one complicated bit, but the social part, through our pride networks, we make sure that people do have a safe place within the firm that, they can reach out to. There are Pride board members. We have executive sponsors, so it's possible for people to reach out to them. And we're trying to also be very nuanced and smart in our global policies so that if you need, for whatever reason, you need the support of some global policies, there are ways to work with our people partners to ensure that, we can help, we can do certain things, again, all within the legal jurisdiction of a country. But there are ways that, we really try as a company to ensure that that inclusion is made available in whatever way we can to people. Does that sort of cover what you were looking for, Sandhya?
Yes, Sujata, I'm just going to take that, a level deeper. And we've also often noticed that when there are organizations somewhere, the trust levels of employees are a lot higher when they see organizations also having an active voice outside of the workplace, right? Sujata, would you like to maybe talk about one or two practices that you followed as an organization where you've been able to be a part of the larger community to build more confidence in the fact that our actions, inspire a walk the talk, intention for our people?
Absolutely. So again, I think, listen, living in the United States and working here, it is much easier to be, quite vocal and quite, I guess, quite public and, the way we support and things. So I am very conscious of the fact that it is a huge privilege and that we are able to do that. So I think our firm has been, we signed recently an amicus brief that is for LGBT rights. There is something that we could sign with our US Supreme Court, and we signed that of LGBT inclusion within our firm. So it's a big nod to our colleagues saying that this is important for us. This is, as a firm, Doug Peterson as our CEO is supporting this. So it just sets a tone of what it is that we believe in as a company and how important this is to us. We're very vocal with our Courageous Conversation series. We have top people from, advocates, allies, and LGBT plus, people who are incredibly prominent in their fields, bringing them in to speak to our communities. So recently we had, and I'm sure a lot of people in the audience will know Laverne Cox. She's a transgender woman of color, and she was one of our key speakers in our Courageous Conversation series. And I bring that up really to just show that there is a space being created. And I think that space is the most important thing. We're not posturing to be, kind of showing people outside, oh, we've got these celebrity LGBT plus people. It is really to show people here, learn to kind of look at it with an empathetic lens and say what people's journeys have been, what they have had to go through to achieve some of the success that we as allies take for granted. And that really has hit me, Sandhya, the commitment this company has. And no wonder, people outside recognize it, because it's not in all this, speakers and networks and things, but it's in our policies. And we've tried to be incredibly empathetic and open-minded in our policies as well, to ensure people really have the best possible experience working at this firm. So, yeah, I mean, I think we do. I'm proud to say we actually do walk the talk, and there are many examples of that every day that's happening through our Pride Network, through the sort of programming that they do internally and externally.
Thank you. Thanks, Sujata. Hi, Tanuj. It's good to see you. I hope you are feeling your network is acting. Oh, I mean, is acting aligned to how you wanted to be
so
right now.
I had to figure out. I'm using somebody else's laptop right now. I don't know what happened to my laptop. It decided not to connect to the Wi-Fi just 2 minutes before the webinar was to start. So apologies for that.
No, thank you, Tanuj. I empathize. I've been having a rough day myself with different apps on the laptop, but thank you. In fact, you're also right in time, for us to take that conversation with Sujata a little deeper, to understand from the India lens, Tanuj, what were some of the initial steps, right? I think that messaging becomes very important, because how do we know, especially, while there is a certain degree of awareness that exists in the larger ecosystem in our country, Sometimes our work, we don't really proactively have these conversations in the workplace. So what was the messaging, what was the narrative when we began, and what were some of the initial steps we started with when it came to the LGBTIQA plus inclusion in India?
So you see, our messaging initially, obviously, the focus started from looking at gender diversity. That was the initial, I would say, the early stages. But over a period of last few years, through very concentrated efforts, participation from our Pride PRG, we have over 600 volunteers in India who are running this chapter, and we've been able to kind of expand the definition to include a much wider framework. And right now, the appreciation, the understanding has gone up significantly. People understand what it is. People also understand why it is important and how it has been adding value to the organization, how important it is for what we do, what we gain out of it. So the acceptability has gone up, and we see it going forward. It will only increase. We've just finished the merger of iJust Market and SPGI. We had very strong participation on both sides, and now the combined teams coming together, we're looking at leveraging the experiences. The journeys were different. The pace at which this was evolving in both the organization was different. So, but that experience is now going to be very, very useful for us, and we are looking at taking it forward. We're looking at how do we increase the acknowledgement, how do we increase the sensitivity. A lot of our teams in India now work in a very global environment. So the sensitivity automatically obviously increases. They are aware of what is happening outside India. They're aware of the conversations which are happening outside India, things which happen in US. People are aware of it. And we're looking at over a period of time diluting what is India and what is rest of the organization. We have one organization. Our values are same. Our thought process on this are same. Our approach to approaching inclusion and diversity is also same.
Thank you, Tanuj. And 600 people strong. I mean, that's a really, really massive,
Yeah.
set of, and if you can help us understand, because it's also been a challenge for us to understand, right? Because a common question that most organizations come back with is saying that, we got excited. We had a, group of volunteers initially. We had an ERG, but the ERG finally came together like 12 months later. So I'm really curious to understand, one, how much of this kind of evolved organically? How much of it is engineered, right? So what's the balance between where some of the employee resource groups or business resource groups actually require guidance and facilitation, but how much do you also leave to their own accountability and responsibility so that they can thrive for the same purpose with which they were established?
Okay, great question. So Sandhya, here I think the executive sponsorship is very important. So right from the top, CEO and everyone else in the organization, I think this subject is very close to their heart. So in their words, their action, I think we see it. It's one of the topmost priorities for the organization. I think that kind of gives a very good landing space of why it is essential for us as an organization. Then the second part of it is that people choose to join a resource group based on their own interests and passion. We don't expect anyone to be part of any PRG, as we call it. At this point of time, almost 40% of all our colleagues across the globe are part of one or the other PRG. We have 9 PRGs in the organization. They cover a length of issues, right from women development and empowerment to parents network to veterans, and obviously Pride is an extremely important PRG. In Pride, there are over 600 volunteers in India at this point of time. I think they have come together over a period of years, seeing what we have done. They have a very strong engagement. So what they gain out of it is that, one, it's for their own personal interest and passion. Second, I think it's for their leadership development. It gives them great internal and external networking opportunities. The kind of work they do is amazing. The kind of events they run internally, the kind of engagement they run with the industry is amazing. The amount of work they produce in terms of helping people become more aware is great. So for example, some of the things like they create FAQs on, if somebody wants to come out in open about anything, any subject, then what they need to know, and they will help people. So people walk into any decision which they want to take, whether to disclose or not disclose, and they can see and learn from experiences of others. So I think just because of the amazing work they do, I think people get excited, and once they join a group, they continue to stick with it.
Interesting. Thanks, Tanuj. And, I think that also brings such a great deal of realism into the way we also outline some of our DEI charters, right? Because at the end of the day, everything that drives us is to make it a more inclusive workplace for all communities that work with us. And it's always empowering, and at the same time sets a very real tone when you have that kind of participation, from our larger group of associates. Shravanti, coming to you now, and given a little bit of what you had mentioned initially, saying that we were also one of the organizations that truly began our journey, starting with the gender space and evolving from there on. What were some learnings that you had when we started off with gender diversity and inclusion that we were able to apply? When we consciously started thinking about LGBTIQA plus inclusion in the workplace.
Can you hear me okay? Sorry, I have to check because I'm still worried that you can't hear me.
We can.
Okay. I think Tanuj and Sujata covered quite a bit on how we've taken the initially when we started with the WINS or one gender related PRG to where we are today. I think a lot of learnings, there are different initiatives and across, right, that we were able to apply. One, I think mostly bringing, initially it all started with the diversity as a concept, but then eventually we realized, having diverse group is one aspect, but also having an inclusive team, right? That's where a lot of our power comes in. We bring people to the table and we also make sure they're feeling inclusive, that they have a voice at the table and they're able to freely speak their minds if there's any topic or anything that they want to bring in forward. Like, for example, I'll tell you, recently we hired differently abled people and also LGBTQ. We had a huge success this year. When I say huge success from where we were compared to the last few years to this year, we've seen double digit increase. So one of the things that the hiring managers have came back and asked, or the PRGs have came back and asked, is can we ensure our workplace can be more inclusive in terms of the physical infrastructure related needs. We did have like a wheelchair or braille conference rooms identified previously, but then specific needs, can we have the toilets which can actually open with a click of a button, and we are anything that the people have asked, which completely makes sense, and as we are modernizing our infrastructure as well, we are taking care of some of these things. I was actually in the London office, and we do have, most of the locations have gender neutral bathrooms. And it's interesting for me as an Indian when I am there to see lines at the bathrooms. I mean, it's it was interesting, but I normally am used to seeing lines in only the women's room. But this is a change, right? We are trying to say we are being inclusive. We treat everyone the same. We think about diversity in everything, and we also want inclusivity. People have their share, whatever they want to say freely. I think Sujata did mention about the courageous conversations. That speaks a lot in itself, right? When bringing that awareness in the teams, right? There's anything related to I think a lot, the Black, Hispanic, the riots that happen in the US, though they're not directly related to the Indian concept, I think that's the awareness that we have now, that, people are CEO, like Sujata did mention, Doug is very passionate about this. So it makes, that's everything that we do. I mean, irrespective of the group PRG that is there, I think the top down, the leadership are quite aware of the DEI, and it runs in our blood right now. I can see that.
Thank you. Thanks, Shravanti. So I think the focus continuously shifting from just diversity to actually creating an inclusive climate, and I think taking that approach to be able to work on the integration of many of different communities, I think as an approach I can see evolving as well. And Sujata, while Shravanti says that it runs in our blood, and there's a great deal of heart that we can all experience even on this call, you require the head and you require the hands. So if I had to ask you, what were some critical success factors according to you? What are some, right? That enables organizations tied this way, because at the end of the day it is a transformation of sorts, right? It is really going back, sometimes assessing your own self-beliefs. I think having open conversations, maybe building a culture of curiosity as opposed to judgment. So what do you think are critical success factors of enabling a transformation such as this in especially large organizations that span across geographies and businesses?
Great question, Sandhya. And I love how you framed it, talking about sort of curiosity without judgment. I think in the end, that is one of the critical factors that I really try to embrace and say, okay, if you come to this work with empathy and with humility and really knowing what you don't know, I think that is key. We've referenced the merger. We brought two very big companies together. And now we are one big S&P Global with over close to 40,000 people globally. So what are the factors then that sort of are helping us transform in this space? We've talked a lot about our pride networks. And I think with a strong global pride network, I think you are able to really enact a lot of what we're all talking about. We need a vehicle to actually sort of, push a lot of this through. So that's a very critical factor. I think the idea, even Tanuj briefly talked about it, the fact that we have 600 people in our Pride network, a lot of those people are allies and advocates and people who feel like they care enough about, everyone in our company feeling included, that they do want to they want to learn, they're curious, they want to help in whatever ways they can, and they want to be there as a advocate and ally for their colleagues. So that is another critical factor. And we are creating that space for allies to feel confident to sort of come out and say, we are allies. We're trying to create the space for individuals who identify as LGBTQ+ to come out in this space. I think a strong partnership with our regional HR partners, that's also really important, because I can't sit here in New York and pretend I know what someone who is identifying as LGBT+ in Pakistan or in Manila, how they're experiencing S&P in that, in that office. So I think it's critical to have an open and very strong partnership with our HR partners so that the local challenges can be addressed. And then, one of the things that I think Tanuj or Shravanti mentioned is we are doing sort of LGBT plus sensitivity training, making sure that our recruiters, our hiring managers, they understand enough about the space. We often talk about, right, this whole idea of you might have personal beliefs, you might have personal biases, but the workplace is, there are certain norms, behaviors, values that are expected. And it is critical that everyone understands that this is no longer about, your personal beliefs or systems. Everybody is protected in the same way in our companies and under the law. And we need to be incredibly mindful of how we show up at work. And that is part of that transformation, right? You move from me and sort of my world to, okay, a larger sort of, this is our company, this is sort of some of the behaviors we expect. And yeah, that, I think these have been some key factors in at least our journey. I'm careful about using words like success and things like that. I think it's a journey. We care enough to try. I think that's, for me, the most important part. We are committed to this work and we care enough. So we're moving well along this journey. So I'll put it like that, Sandhya.
Thank you. Thanks, Sujata. And, I know we also need to part some time for the Q&As that are coming. And I see some interesting questions coming in. Tanuj, maybe, one last question to you, just as part of the structure of this webinar. How is your personal experience, change the way that you perceive or your approach to driving and even leading LGBTIQA plus inclusion for S&P today?
So, you see, as Sujata just said, that it's a journey. And I think we're learning, we're evolving as we're moving forward. I don't think we've reached a stage where we would say that we've achieved what we wanted to achieve. I think, but we are very proud of what we have achieved over the last few years. Personally, for me, I think my own understanding of this subject, how important it is for the community, for the company, I think has improved and enhanced over the last few years. I think discussions with people who are part of this network as allies or who are part of this community, I think has helped me understand what challenges they have faced, how it is different for them, how it is difficult for them, and how certain things which we don't realize in our day-to-day conversations and actions impact. So I think that sensitivity has improved personally for me. And in my role, how it helps me is that I can now take those experiences back in my conversations when I engage with leaders, business leaders, the people managers, want to tell them that what we need, what we do has to be very, very balanced. It has to be very measured. We have to be very sensitive and inclusive about our thought process, our actions, our decisions, and how we can use our roles to take this message further down. Because you see, at the end of the day, 10 or 20 or 30 people talking about this subject or being aware of it does not really change the culture of the organization. So each and every one has to be aware. They have to be part of this whole transformation, this whole journey. So using the leaders for driving those conversations within their smaller teams is extremely important. So that's how I have been using my experiences over the last few years, Sandhya.
Thank you. Thanks, Tanuj. I also see we have a few questions coming in, and maybe I'll pick that up and transition back to Isha for the final round of the webinar. I think any one of you, Sujata, Shravanti, Tanuj, any one of you can take this one up. There's, I think, one very specific question on saying one of the candidates who is going for gender reassignment from male to female is planning to join our organization. How can we make her life comfortable in office? How can we balance being transparent about her gender, but at the same time not embarrass the person. Any advice from either of you here on call?
I'm happy to take it, Sandhya, because obviously this is some of the work that I do, even in S&P Global. So that is a great question, first of all, and it's something that we address through policies. We have very specific policy regarding transitioning into the workforce, and you need to be, it's not something that, as colleagues, you and I can just say, okay, great, this is what we're going to do or what we're not going to do. I would really encourage you to look at best practices in this, in transitioning, and how you can actually find there are playbooks on how to sort of work through this. Sandhya, I'm happy to provide some resources after this to you, and maybe if there is some way we can get it to people. There's some wonderful public resources that you as a colleague can pass to your HR department. And I would absolutely make sure that there's a playbook both for the person who's transitioning in and then for the person who is their hiring manager and team. And usually for companies that don't have a policy around it, what we usually suggest is speak to the person, have a candid with your HR person to say, how would you like this to go? Let's put some dignity and respect back into this process and say, what is it, person X, that you would like? How would you like to be addressed? How do you see this? And work together to sort of have a clear plan and some clear communications, because this whole idea, and you make a very good point about embarrassing people. We want to be super sensitive about that, and people can do that unknowingly as well. So we want to make sure that the person who's coming back into the workforce, they have a voice in how they want this whole thing to sort of unfold. But in the meantime, if you don't have that, I will happily provide some publicly available resources to Sandhya, and I would encourage you to reach out and talk to them and see if there's anything you can glean from that as you build your policy out. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, Sujata, thank you. And yeah, I just see that we're also, questions are flowing in right now. So we'll probably take a couple more before I hand it over to Isha. I think most organizations, while are making efforts and also acknowledge that, yes, this is a journey at the end of the day. How does one measure, or what is a measurement, tools that you have to understand whether we're moving in the right direction, whether some of these programs are actually creating, an impact, whether tangible or intangible, because not everything, would like to be quantified or can be quantified. So therefore, what are some ways in which you measure if, some of the efforts that you're putting in is leading to the right objectives that you are embarking on?
I can take the first step, but Sujata, please add on. So I've led one of the ERGs before, PRGs before, and this is a constant question that I myself as a chapter head had faced. So what I've realized is building that team, right? A group of people who actually can listen, find opportunities out there. Just, I think first step is to build the right team. Second is put smaller goals. I mean, this is an add-on work. When we started out first, I think I myself put long list of to-do list, and and instead of putting a long list and not feeling good at the end of the year, I would say put reasonable goals and achieve them, right? And do celebrate. So what helped, I mean, this is an add-on, in addition to your day job, this is an additional work. So it just helps to look back and say, every year we actually do every PRG for our, in our teams, they prepare a yearbook end of the year, what all they've done in a small infographic or like a little video. And it's amazing to see, all the work that has been done. In terms of KPIs, when we started, we said, okay, how many people attended, how many people we touched. But then as we matured, what we've realized is the quality, how many people did we really impact, right? Change in the mindset. I remember one of the initial sessions that the Pride team has done. There's this always one question that goes when you see somebody, do I ask this question or should I ask or not? Or, is it, they've actually given tools for people like me who have these questions. I think it helped me, right? And I would say that is a success factor. That is a metric that I would put. So, little things, be meaningful, reasonable goals is what I would say, and then celebrate. But yeah, Tanuj, Sujata, if you want to add.
Tanuj, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So I think anything we do, we must measure, and if we don't measure, I don't think we'll be able to keep ourselves honest. So I think it's extremely important question, what success measures. So I think a couple of points from my perspective could be, and this is a mix of lead and lag indicators depending on what stage the organization is at. So it could be in terms of number of cases which are coming in, the discrimination cases. So that could be a good indicator. So over a period of time, you can monitor the trend and see if the numbers are dropping. No cases is also a sign that people are not reporting. So maybe it's not a comfortable environment. So you have to read it in context of where the organization is. A lot of organizations do quarterly or annual engagement scores. So they have ways of reaching out to people. So in those surveys, questions around inclusion, diversity, equity could be embedded, and scores can be monitored. So that gives a very good insight to the leadership, the organization, in terms of awareness. Are people feeling safe? Are they feeling included? Are they proud of the organization's stand and vision on this? So these are some of the thoughts from my side. Sujata, if you want to add anything.
Tanuj, that was brilliant. I actually, but thinking about it, I'd never thought of looking at from the sort of compliance side, right? How many cases are coming in? So that's that's a genuinely smart way of looking at how you measure effectiveness. There's two more things I'd love to add. One is, if you have a large enough Pride group or whatever ERG, if it's 10 or 15 people, you don't want to do a focus group, an anonymized focus group, but that's another great way to get a sense of the inclusion part, right? How people are feeling within the firm. So it ties on to a little bit what Tanuj was saying. In our firm, we do a big survey. It's called Vibe. We do a pulse of it. I think 2 times a year we do a pulse, and then we do a big Vibe survey. And those have a ton of DEI questions in it around inclusion. But you won't get, for specific, if you want to measure inclusion efforts of a certain group, then a smaller anonymized focus group that a third party can do for your company, or you can have, somebody who's completely not related to the PRG or to the human resources in any way do that for you. Another interesting way is also looking at representation numbers, right? So Tanuj's point is actually a very interesting one. You can look at compliance and the cases of discrimination. You can also look at representation. How many LGBT people are coming into your company? Because a lot of this is also on Glassdoor, on all the other methods we have of, through Great Place to Work India. Somebody realizes company is LGBTQ plus friendly, then how are we bringing people in? If those numbers keep going up and we are seeing an increased number of people coming in, that's also a measure of effectiveness to see, yes, this company is friendly and we can have more people coming in. So yeah, all great points. And Tanuj, you taught me something today. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And I think we went from a variety of, how does it impact an individual, with which Shravanti started, and Tanuj brought in the element of, the larger piece around people and strategy and the people strategy. And then Sujata, thank you for adding over and above that. It's been such a pleasure, chatting with all of you. I'm also going to hand it over to Isha, because I know Isha has a whole set of interesting questions lined up for you. So Isha, over to you.
Thank you, Sandhya, and I will be passing back for closing remarks. So just this is a quick, we're going to go ahead with a quick rapid fire session. It'll be 3 to 4 short questions, and whoever answers first wins. What you win, I'm not sure, but you win. So the first question for all 3 of our panelists is true or false? You can't change someone's character, but you can change their behavior.
True.
True.
Yes, that was directly inspired by Sujata. I think a little bit of elaboration just for context setting would is welcome.
It's something that somebody actually said to me. I think one of the frustrations working in DEI is you see things quite differently with quite an empathetic and sort of kinder eye. And I think respecting the fact that people's background and characters are formed long before you can influence or change it. I think the idea is that at some point as a company, and we touched on this briefly by a lot of things that we've talked about, we all come with our different backgrounds, with our levels of empathy, but there are certain norms and behaviors and values that a global company like S&P will expect from you. And it doesn't matter what you feel personally about something, there are certain behaviors that we expect to create an inclusive workplace for all our colleagues. So at some point, that's where compliance and HR come in. There are certain things we expect, and you do have to comply by that and do certain behaviors that we accept in the company. So if you want to work in some of these firms, there are certain things that are expected. And if you don't comply by that, you will have to leave. So you can change behaviors. People's behaviors do grow and change. And I'd like to give them credit to think it's coming from a higher place. But in the end, your character is your own, but your behavior in the workplace is defined by the norms and values of the workplace. So that's what I was referencing, Isha.
Thank you so much. Next question. Describe your ideal future for pride at the workplace, for LGBTQIA plus inclusion at the workplace in 3 words.
So for me, it would be accepted, respected, and cherished.
Love that. Love that. Thank you. Just a couple more questions. Who has impacted you most to engage in DEI and LGBTQIA plus inclusion?
For me, a little survey that was rolled out for a mentoring program, and that changed my attitude to the whole diversity and inclusion programs. And then my manager, my first manager at S&P Global was a member of the LGBTQ community, and to me that was an experience that changed my world of breaking my biases as well.
If I may ask before I head to the last question, what was it about the survey?
Oh, it was it just said, first come, first serve. It's a mentoring program for just the women only.
Okay.
And then I just tried. I think I saw the survey. I just liked the subject line. I don't remember exactly what words they used, but they said something around mentoring program for women leaders who want to thrive in S&P Global. Something around those lines, and just went ahead and clicked the survey, got into the program. It was for a very small group. I think it was a pilot program, the first pilot program for WINS. I was one of those initial, I don't know, 15, 20 people, I think. So it just gave a different perspective and of the organization itself. Yeah.
Great. Okay. And our last question is, please finish this sentence. A strong community is?
I'll take that. An empathetic community.
Yeah.
Perfect. Sandhya, I'd like to hand it over to you for closing remarks.
Thank you. Thanks, Isha. Sujata, Tanuj, Shravanti, thank you for being here. And I think thank you to, for all the attendees of the, and all the delegates who actually came in here to listen to the conversation. It was very inspiring for us as an institute to continue to know that you approach DEI with this continued humility, with curiosity, really looking at it as a journey. And we look forward to learn more from you along the way. Thank you for taking time out. And Sujata, I know very crazy time zone for you, but thank you for accommodating and being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Wonderful
Thank you.
session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.